and I've created some slides as well to support this, so I'll just share those with you. Appreciate it's a bit death by PowerPoint. I'm really sorry. The whole sort of teaching experience isn't is far from ideal at the moment. So I suppose the only benefit of it is that we can keep it quite short and sweet and just get you the contents that you need as and when you need it. But aside from that, I know it's not ideal. Okay. Sorry. Right. Are you okay? Can you see my slides all right? No, you can't, can you? Yeah, you should be able to actually. Can anyone confirm if you can see them?
Yeah, they've come up now.
Hey, fantastic. Okay. So the first thing that's worth mentioning, which again is like just a bit of a pain and will hopefully explain why some of the like there's some confusion about submission dates. For some reason, so Jo and myself, we will always do our, I'll just let some people in the need to come in. We'll always do our best in terms of trying to give you everything you need as and when you need it. But we're sort of working against a really strange, like things are a bit sort of the way they're set up aren't always logical. And an example of this is when your course has been set up, they've merged yourselves with another cohort, which is RA5. And what that means is on Moodle, we can't do 2 different submission dates. So, you know, when you're saying what date are we actually submitting, because it's all a bit confusing, isn't it? That's why, is because so there are different, because there are different submission dates on for you. So I'm really sorry about that. It's just something we're having to live with at the moment, and we've tried to get you separated, but you know, when it's like computer says no and it's just you don't understand why. Yeah, I do feel like I'm talking to myself, but I'm trying to explain. It's just I'm sorry, I realise it's a pain, and I've tried to do things about it, but they're just, I think we're just gonna have to live with it. But we'll be clear with you as to when the dates are, but it just seems a bit confusing, doesn't it? So that's why that is. Okay. Is there anyone who has submitted and I haven't responded to you? Have I missed anybody? Take that as no. Okay, that's good. Right. Okay, so through this programme, we've got 8 modules where you'll be taught. So it sort of lasts 2.5 years, and it'll either be Jo or myself teaching you, and you'll do 7 assessments, and then at the end of it you do a work-based project, and it all leads up to something called the Endpoint Assessment. How did Jo run an induction for you? Anyone?
Yeah, we did have an induction with Jo.
Yeah, and did she talk about things like the Endpoint Assessment?
Yeah, I don't think it was that much detail, but she did say
yeah,
we would have to spend six months or something doing it.
Yeah, okay. So please, if I'm repeating things, I think when you first come on it, you're just told loads of things and they don't necessarily mean anything at that point in time. So I sort of think it's worth us returning to certain things and just hopefully they'll make more sense as we go along. So what happens is you have your assessments. So you've got 7 of those and then this work-based project, so sort of 8 modules. Meanwhile, every 3 months, you have a 3-way review, which is sometimes more challenging than others, just because if you're in a position where you actually haven't got a line manager or that sort of time, it's quite difficult, but we really need to try and do those. And then also you need to build something called a portfolio of evidence, and that's what this session's about, which shows the knowledge that you're applying. So it's your skills and behaviour. So it supports everything that we're trying to measure on this apprenticeship, that you're actually doing those things in practice. So in today's session, I want to sort of introduce you to what's required of the portfolio. I'm going to be honest, it should be what you're doing at through your work. So actually, this isn't meant to put lots of extra stuff on you at all. And the 3-way reviews are meant to bring out with yourself and someone else, or your line manager, what you could use to capture as evidence and add to this portfolio. So please don't think, oh God, you know, the assessments are bad enough as it is, I'm gonna have to do this as well. This should be fairly straightforward, because it should just be what you're doing anyway, and we just need to work out how do we capture that to show you're doing it. We then, what the CMI have done, what we've got is like a list of standards, and I don't think you've got a list of those either. Have you ever been given that? A list of the knowledge, skills and behaviours that we're measuring, or that need to be sort of evidenced?
I don't recall so, but that might just be my memory, to be honest.
No, that's what I don't want to make assumptions. You've got everything, I'm giving you all twice, but by the same thing, I don't think you necessarily have. So what I'm going to do as a follow-up, I'll put these slides on Moodle. I'm going to put a document which will itemise the knowledge, skills and behaviours, because they're there's like 1.1, 1.2, and they're all grouped together according to certain skill sets like communication, stakeholders. And I'm also going to put a Word document which you can start filling in yourself as you think, oh, I've got a piece of evidence there that shows that. So I'm going to put 3 things on Moodle, and then a link to this presentation as well. So, and I'll copy Jo in so that she's aware that I've shared that with you. So I'll just make a note of that, and then Word document. Okay. So you'll have this list. Now, to give you a bit of an insight in terms of CMI and how long they've got to look at things, with the degree, which is a bit bigger in terms of it's like over sort of 3 or 4 years, whereas yours is over, like in effect, just over half of that. They have 5 hours to check through their portfolio. So thinking for you, it'll probably be about 3 hours they're going to use to check through your portfolio, 2 to 3 hours. It's not long. So basically, they want to see really good examples of evidence, but they don't want to see very many, because if they're having to look through, if you're sort of showing, if there's like, for example, 100 things you have to tick off, the last thing they want is 100 pieces of evidence. They want really good pieces of evidence which will show a project that you've done, an initiative you've done, something that you've been responsible for, and it ticks off stakeholder engagement, it ticks off communication, it ticks off performance management or leading a team. So they want a few pieces that show as much as possible. So that's the goal, really. They want at maximum 20 things to have a look at that show that you've covered all the criteria that are required. And so we've had a challenge with, and I don't know if any of you know anyone that was on one of the first or second cohorts for this programme. It's just it's an embarrassment, because they went from tutor to tutor, no one was doing 3-way reviews, and they've got to the end point now, we're just about to go to it, and they're having to create the evidence now, so they're having to look backwards, and there is no way we will ever allow that to happen again. Okay, so what we're doing this time is we're getting the 3-way review set up really early on, so you're starting to do those with Jo. Then in terms of portfolio, after every module, Jo came up with this idea, which I think is really good, where we start to think about what evidence would relate to that module. So in terms of what could you put in your portfolio, and if we do it as a group, then hopefully then you can think, oh, that's a good idea, I've got something similar to that. So that's why we're going to build in these like short sessions after each module that you've done. So in terms of what they're looking for is knowledge. And as I said, the knowledge is fairly straightforward because you've got your assessments. Your skills, and the behaviours is where we're looking at this portfolio, where it demonstrates what you've done in the workplace. And I think you can go back, I think it's about 5 years. So it doesn't have to be stuff that you're doing right at the moment. You've got a little window to go back and sort of think about anything that you've done in the past that you might be able to capture some evidence about. So during the programme, you've got your regular assessments. I'm just looking at this diagram here. So that's you're writing them, we mark them. Also during the programme, you're developing this portfolio. So you're building elements in, you're sort of ticking them off that you've got them to show the development you're doing in the workplace. Your work-based project, I'll be working with you on that, and that will start. You need an idea just at the end of the project, at the end of the programme, and you'll have to write 500 words about what the concept is. Then you've got 3 or 4 months before you're assessed on it, and you have to do it in that period of time. Now, just to plant some seeds, you don't have, if you've already got something that you'd really like to do in mind, let me know sooner rather than later so you can start working on it. So it doesn't have to be done that last minute. It can be done before that. It's about 4,000 words. It is a genuine piece of work that you're doing at work. I've got a template for it because you know I love my templates. So it just makes sure, and the reason I do those is to make sure you hit all the learning criteria, all the assessment criteria, because the worst thing would be if you're working really hard and you've missed something just because the sessions are a bit woolly and you're not getting the information you need. Then we also need to do these 3-way reviews. That's 360-degree feedback, and that you've hit all the you've done all the assessments. So that we'll work with you on those, and then you get to what's called this endpoint assessment, or a gateway first of all. Now the gateway is where we say, right, everything's ready for you, CMI to review. So this is nothing for you to do. This is something for us to organise. So we make sure we go through. Make sure that you've done all your assessments, that you've got through them, there's been no bits you've been referred on. Elliot, who's our course leader, will then quality assure them to make sure they're okay. And we'll make sure that you've got your project overview as well in there. Your portfolio needs to be in there. You've got your 3-way reviews in there. So we've brought everything together, and then we give it to CMI, and they have a couple of months then where they'll go through it all. And the reason it's a couple of months is so that you can do this work-based project. If you've done it already, your work-based projects, potentially we could bring the gateway a little bit, we could bring the endpoint assessment a bit sooner. So the endpoint assessment is a bit peculiar. They tend to be done, obviously at the moment they're done remotely, but I think you may well find it's remote anyway, just because of the logistics of doing it. They did have a test and they've scrapped that now, so that's good. But what they do is you do a presentation. The reason it's peculiar, sorry, is just because they make you show the room apparently. So you have to show on your laptop and your camera that there's no one else hiding in the room. And I'm really not sure how you'd, if I was to try and show you now, I don't know how, whether you sort of show under the desk or what you do. But they just want to make sure that it's just you and them. So you do a 20-minute presentation on your project. They will ask you about 8 questions on your project. And then they do an interview on these knowledge, skills and behaviours. So this checklist I'm going to give you, they'll almost like pick on a few of them and go, talk me through a situation where you've done this. But they'll do that based on having looked at your portfolio as well. So none of this is a memory test at all. It's literally just thinking of examples, and you could have some written down. You could actually create the criteria sort of for yourself. You could print it off and actually put notes down as to that's a good example of that, that's a good example of this. So it's not to trip you up in the slightest. It's literally just to demonstrate that you've got experience doing things thereafter. And they're also keen to understand, so you've got your work-based projects as well, presentation, 20 minutes, eight questions on that. You've got your professional discussion based on your portfolio. And then they're also interested in professional discussion based on your development activities. And when you start doing your 3-way reviews with Joe, we follow a template for those. So we've got a standard set of questions which look at how are you going to develop your career in the future, what's in place for you to sort of really, what skills and qualities do you need? So that's part of this discussion. Have you got any questions on the sort of what I've spoken about so far?
What's the workplace project about? Is it I'm not really sure.
Yeah, so
yeah,
it will be completely bespoke to you. It's something where you identify, it basically can't be business as usual. So it's got to be something where you've identified a problem, or there's an opportunity, or there's something where you're looking at debriefing on lessons learned. So that's quite a typical one that I'm working with people on. It's about 4,000 words. And it's something where you're exploring something and coming up with a series of options and a series of recommendations. So it's very practical. There's not learning in terms of you'll put into place some of the things like you'll do a Gantt chart, you'll do a risk analysis, you'll do a stakeholder analysis. So the things that we've done on the course, you'll put them into practice in doing that. But it's very much between you and your line manager. And what you might find if you are in a role where you don't get a lot of projects like that, let me know if something special comes up, because that's happened with various people on the programme so far, where they're actually like, I don't normally get that, but I've got an opportunity at the moment. Can I start it now? Well, like, absolutely, if that helps you.
Yeah,
any clearer? It's still it's
yeah, it does, yeah.
Yeah, it tends to be about an issue that's coming up. Do you know something that I've noticed with the organisation is there's sort of a lot of silos, aren't there? So one of the things is about sort of almost creating best practice, and then how it's rolled out to different areas could be, you know, just, but yeah, you think of something, but also think of something maybe that raises your profile a little bit, so that this course doesn't feel like, you know, it feels like at the end of it you've got further, which is what we want you to do, that supported your development.
Sorry, Hannah. So
yeah, go for it.
Sorry, just to clarify, if a project starts earlier, we can start the end of project earlier. Because I was just thinking, I've got something coming up in maybe about 7 or 8 months that I could use, but after that, I definitely won't.
Yeah, let me know when you have, because I'm doing the endpoint project, I'm doing the work-based projects, I'm not your supervisor. If that's the case and you've got something really good in mind, please let me know.
Okay, cool, I will do, thank you.
So yeah, and I'll support you through that. So it doesn't, all we need to do is just make sure that the dates aren't too far out away from the endpoint assessment, so it doesn't feel like it was sort of done in, you know, years ago. That's all.
Yeah, I'll have a chat with you then. It's hard, isn't it? Because it's like when projects come up, they're quite rare.
I think it is, yeah. And somebody, one of the traffic officers in the West Midlands, he had a brilliant project, but normally he doesn't get them, and it was just like it finished as we started, and we retrofitted it really to make sure that it worked, because there's no other way that he was going to get it. Yeah. Honest, with this, we're totally about trying to get it to work. And I mean, my marking, as well as I hopefully you sort of gathered, is about like trying to find the evidence. It's not about trying to trip you up at all. It's far from it. It's the other way around. It's about trying to anything that we can use to show that you've done what you need to do, without you having to rework it. That's what we want to do. So you'll get out of it. You've got obviously being part of the apprenticeship. You've got your diploma level 5, CMI, because you've gone through that. But actually, what else you've got out of this? If you've got 5 years management experience by the time we get to the end of the programme, and that doesn't mean that you have to have had people management. So you could be in a project role or something like that, but you have responsibility for something. So either you have this qualification, plus if you've already got a degree in a different discipline, you'd need 3 years management experience. But if this is your highest level qualification, you'll need to demonstrate that you've got 5 years management experience, and you can do it after the end of this programme, it's fine. And then you can apply to be a chartered manager. And I think that's probably, out of everything, that is the biggest win for you, because, you know, it's sort of, just as you get chartered engineers, a chartered manager is sort of very like the gold standard. So I think career-wise would really, really help you in terms of your personal profile. Okay. Any questions before I move on?
What if you won't have 5 years, obviously you haven't got that opportunity, have you, in terms of management?
So when I was asking them, so what sort of thing have you got any?
Well, line management only started like last year, so probably similar time to start the course.
Yeah. So you just wait until, so it isn't, right, when it finishes, you've got your level 5, okay, so qualification. So you've got that. So that's one of the things they're looking for. So it's a level 5 plus 5 years experience. So once you get to 5 years, then you send your CV off and your experience, and then you'll get it.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not like you've got one opportunity to do this, far from it.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, so you will get it. It just might take if you're fairly new to management, it might just take a little bit longer, just in terms of building that experience up.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, it's a pleasure. So as I say, you've got your units, your 8 assignments, and in that I am including your work-based projects as one of those. Then we've got this portfolio of knowledge, skills and behaviours. I'll just let me show you what that looks like, what we're building up, because I think that's more helpful. Otherwise it feels very hypothetical, doesn't it, really? I'm not sharing all my screen, I'm just sharing my slides. So let me share my whole desktop. Okay. I think it's right towards the end of this document. What they do is, right, because they've only got 2.5 hours, and then your work-based project, they're probably going to give about an hour or two to look through that. They don't look through everything, they sample it. So basically, the higher the quality of information, the less sampling they'll need to do. So they'll be like more sort of thinking, oh, actually, this person has got it sorted here. So what we need to do is give them quite a high level of confidence that the quality is really good of what you're supplying. If it isn't, for any reason, and if they've got any questions, they will come back to us, because again, it's in their interest to make sure you get through this. So please don't, just know that everybody involved wants this to work for you. So can you see here, we've got the mapping of knowledge, skills and behaviours.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, brilliant, thank you.
Yeah.
So you'll see you've got different, so on the knowledge, we've got a headline is operation management, and then under it, we've got a few things that are like operational business planning techniques and plans, monitoring performance. That will be covered by one of your assessments. And I think one of the ones about sort of managing projects, understanding data security and management, that's and using technology. That there will be some assessment criteria that are around the sort of GDPR type thing. So that would be in there. Leading people, different leadership styles. Well, we know already you've talked about different leadership styles. Leading multiple and remote teams, 502 covers that. So basically under the knowledge, all of these tend to be covered by assessments. Okay. So things like your self-awareness, your own impact and emotional intelligence, different learning styles and behaviours, that sounds to me like 525, isn't it? You know, the reflective practice. Have you done reflective?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and we talked about communication in the last one as well, didn't we? That you've just done, that I marked on Saturday. So you can see here, we've got a big list, and it's a bit like, oh my God. But actually, we're going through it. You're naturally going through all that just through your assignments. Okay. And on that document, what we've done, the Word document that I'm going to send you, we've looked at the assessments. We've looked at actually, say, K5.1 is covered by 502. So we've sort of shown that in your assessment. So almost, daft though it sounds, knowledge, you can forget about, that's sorted. Okay. Portfolio wise, we've got to consider it's the skills that we're looking at. So the skills are the demonstration of practically what you've done. So operational management, this time we're looking at, have you set up operational plans? Have you set KPIs? Are you monitoring performance against plans? Leading people, you know, have we got evidence that you've done coaching and mentoring, or can you create evidence? Is that something you do in your role, or could you get experience of doing it? So we've got different examples here of the skills. See here, so you've got S9.1, able to create a personal development plan. You've already done that, haven't you, as well? 525.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah, okay. So what you'd need to do for that is just update it. So keep it regularly updated. So although there's a lot to it, you're getting through this without even realising it. And then the behaviours, we'll talk about these in your three-way reviews. So actually, how can you give us an example of where you've looked for a new opportunity in your work role? This one, the professionalism, the bottom one, B4.3, operates within organisational values. That made me think of the assignment you've just done as well, where you were citing the values, weren't you? And you were talking about how they're actually shown. And a lot of you gave examples in terms of how you've actually done that in your role. So that's what we're after. So it's like there's a couple of pages on here. So from 28, 29 and 30, that's what you're having to show. And that's what they're going to be asking about. So, for example, with your endpoint assessment, what they'll do is they'll sort of pick on one. So they'll go, do you know what? We're going to go for knowledge, 4.4, K 4.4, and they'll say, give me an example of a situation where you've delegated effectively. So even if you haven't got a direct report, you may have delegated something to someone else. And actually, that could be even more challenging if you haven't got direct authority over them. So you just come up with an example. So I really think if I was you, I'd be creating a version of this, and for each one, I'd be coming up with an example. And then you can talk about it and if you haven't got an example of when you've done it, what we'll do is, as we go through the three-way reviews, we can start picking up, we can start realising actually, we need to do something about this. You haven't got an example of, you haven't done any delegation. So how do we build that into your role? And we talk to your manager as well, and we work out a way where you can get you can get that experience. So just in terms of sort of those criteria and what you've seen, and I realise it's a very, very brief overview. I mean, the ability to build trust, effective. So the trust, you've already used the ABC model, haven't you, in the last assignment, or Laconi's 5 dysfunctions of a team, or Laconi's other ones about building a high functioning team. So you've talked about the principles, but you've applied those as well. How
have you got any? Sorry, Hannah. Have you got any examples or what it kind of should look like, or a framework, or
in terms of the
portfolio? Yeah, like how much you need to actually include. Is it a paragraph or is it 1,000
no
words?
And it's I did the first ever endpoint assessment and I didn't quite do it right, because the way I did it, I was like almost looking for one example for each, and like you were saying, I was almost going on like reflective practice, a time where I managed talent and performance, for example, on S5.1, and they were going, actually, we don't want that. So they got back to me and said, no one failed or anything like that, but it was just the first time for everyone. What they said was, what we'd rather do is an example of where you've worked with, say you've got a couple of team members or you've got an apprentice that's working for you or something like that. They would rather have, so it's called like a witness testimony. So they'd rather your manager or somebody around you actually writes a statement on how you've done that. So rather than you identifying it, but it talks more about just talent and performance. It also shows maybe how you've 6.1, how you've built trust and negotiated. So you're doing it based on a scenario that matches a number of criteria rather than trying to match each criteria off.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because so you could have one scenario which has 4 criteria that it matches.
Absolutely. And actually, if you think about the ability to chair meetings or present using a range of media, active listening and giving constructive feedback, what you could do there is you could actually record something where you've actually got maybe a Teams meeting. It could be, do you know what? It could be like a weekly team, like as in your team meeting every week. And that, you know, that could do S7.
And we only need one example for each one, but they just have to be a decent example.
Yeah, absolutely, and the more decent. But I'm going to come on to like how you can capture these examples. So it isn't like there's one way of doing it. Far from it, which I know is a bit of a. It's almost like if we could just give you a sort of, you just need to do this or you need to do that. But the whole reason for the rationale behind it is it should fit a wide range of different roles. So rather than sort of trying to force it in, we look at what you're doing and how can we bring it out. Here you'll see yeah, you've still got this, haven't you? I can see it's got a red band around it. Let's just make it a bit bigger. So what we've done here is looked at, say, for the knowledge, those criteria you've just seen, and then we've looked at which assignments you've done that fit them. So you can just see, oh, actually, we've covered that through the knowledge base. So then you can start to almost like highlight which bits, and then you can name your portfolio of evidence. So if, for example, if you're monitoring a budget, you might have a project that includes a budget and you've got a piece of evidence that shows that, or that's got a forecast, and you just put the file name in it so that we know we've got that. So the idea with this Word document is it gives you a chance to log the evidence that you're building, and we can just check at the end that everything's covered, and if there's any gaps we can see. You might prefer to do it a different way. This was just something I don't know if Joe set it up or one of my colleagues, but it's got all the criteria down there and just shows. I think it's quite nice because it shows which ones you've done on the assessments, and then you can look at what gaps you've got.
Yeah, that's useful.
Yeah, and right, this isn't sort of like, well, now you've done a couple of assignments, let's go and make it even worse for you. It's not meant to be that. The reason the three-way reviews are a chance to start sort of talking about your portfolio. So we're starting to think, well, what have you been studying? What examples have we got of that? Okay, how can we capture that? And I know I'm doing a three-way reviews for a different cohort, and we're doing a three-way review, and then I'm actually booking afterwards a one-to-one with the person, just so we can actually focus on the portfolio building. And you've still got, is it 2 years, or how far are you away?
I think we've done 6 months, so
yeah, by the time you get to,
we've got about 15 years left. I'm joking.
it's around the end of 2022, isn't it? The end of next year.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, just looking at your dates. Okay. Yeah, it will feel like that though. You'll feel like it's gone. Oh no, yeah, it's yeah, it's just trying to get the pace right for you, isn't it? So it's sort of what we're trying to do is build it so you've just sort of almost like a bit of work quite regularly, and that's like your 1 day a week, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to share with you those 2 documents afterwards, get those all sorted for you. Oh, sorry. Any more questions so far on what I've been showing you? Work-based projects I've mentioned briefly, and I've done something. When you get on to doing this, I want to show you because it's all quite I've worked quite hard on this. I've been trying to do here we go, a graphic for you. Because I like a picture. I think a picture is easier to understand. Can you see that all right?
Yeah.
Can you see the picture? Okay. Yeah. So this is like a checklist of what you need to do if you work-based project. So you've got, before the gateway, you've got to do a proposal, and that's no more than 500 words. It's not marked, but it just shows what you're going to cover in it. And you need some evidence that someone signed it off and agreed to it. So whether that's an email just saying, yes, the business has agreed to you doing it. So we've got that. It can't be hypothetical. It's got to be something you're actually doing. So that's why, if timely wise, you've got something that you do now. That's brilliant. And then this goes into depth about the different sections you've got of the project. So you need to do an executive summary. It just states, and what I've done is, based on all of these things, it's just, it probably feels more complicated than it is, but yeah, you come up with what the issue is, you put a plan together, you go about finding some evidence. The evidence doesn't have to be you doing interviews, it can just be looking at internal systems, it could be secondary data. You have to do something called an ethics application, and that is through the university. It's just to make sure that the way you're getting your evidence together, your research, doesn't put you in any danger. And it's just something that we have to do with every project. It's really straightforward, and I will actually sit with you and do it. So we'll do it on Teams and get you to do it, and I'll approve it there and then. So it's nothing for you to worry about. You then, in your project, talk about how you're going to find the information out to justify, to come up with some solutions or options. You come up with some options. Even if there's only one way forward, you just come up with some alternative. You talk about how you're going to roll it out, what other things you could have done, get some recommendations, and what would you have done differently next time. That should result in a roughly, so I've got a template set up. It's about 4,000 words. It can be more, it can be less, it's fine. And then at the endpoint assessment, you deliver the 20-minute presentation, and I'll just come up with some questions. So again, it's quite vague at this stage, but at this stage, you just want to almost like sow the seeds of what you're working towards. Any questions on that at this stage?
No.
Okay.
No, good, thank you.
Okay, good. Yeah. And please, this isn't all for doing now, is it? It's just sort of step at a time. You'll have finished all your assessments by the time you do that, or you do it in the background, potentially over a longer period of time earlier on. So we'll work a way to make it work for you.
Sorry, do we need to prepare for this 3-way assessment, our first one?
No. Honestly, it's just a chat. It's a really nice opportunity to find out a bit more about what you do, to work out, because we're sort of thinking, okay, that will make a good piece of evidence. You don't need to know that in the sense. So there's no preparation whatsoever. It will be about what she'll be asking you about is things like what the plans are for you to develop in your role. Is there any sort of scope for what things would have been put into place, where you see yourself going? And then your manager also talks about that. You'll talk about like how the modules you've done so far, have you been able to put anything into practice? Have it made you think about anything differently? Because the work environment at the moment makes it really hard to actually implement things. So there is a section on like what are the challenges, and so I've done quite a few of these 3-way reviews, just started doing them, and the challenges are all around remote working. You're not getting the normal opportunity to reflect with your manager as to how's it going at uni, what have you been learning, what can we do to help you. Those little check-ins that you'd get just by being in the same place at the same time, they're harder to do, aren't they? Another question that we ask on the 3-way reviews is actually how you're getting on with the 20% time, how you're recording it, because it's important that you record it, or off the job. And a key part of the off the job thing is it's not just sessions like this. It's not just writing your assignment. It's actually anything that's about your development. So it could be if you've got your sort of weekly check-ins with your manager. It could be about stuff that you're doing that you've never done before. That's all captured, so that can be part of this time. Okay. So they are.
Are we meant to be recording our time then, Hannah? Are we?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Don't worry if you haven't so far. Have you got a spreadsheet or anything that you could, well, just set something up? Have you got it in your diary, the uni days?
I haven't the last 2 months, but I had before. So
you should have a schedule, shouldn't you? Have you got a 12-month plan? Have you got a 12-month plan that you've got been given with all the dates?
Yeah, so we have like the uni days in our calendar, so that counts as like part of the time, don't it? But then I suppose it's then like our study days. Do you mean?
Yeah.
Like we're taking
you put your study days in, but then think about stuff where it's not business as usual. Think about things where maybe you headed up something that's like you've never done before. So actually you've prepared to deliver a presentation to whatever about something so random and vague, I appreciate, but it's just not what you're normally doing. So think about anything that's pushing you out your comfort zone a bit. That can all be included. It's so vague, this is, in the sense what we're trying to do is capture anything that just is showing that you're developing as an individual. So it's not just having a day off, if you like, a day off a week where you're watching podcasts. It's meant to be like if you're on a secondment, that's generally a really good opportunity to show lots of things that you've never done before.
Okay, yeah. So if say like you're working on something and it's a process, or you're being involved with a department you've never worked before, then that could be used as your hours as well. Totally,
yeah. It's stuff like that. But the reason we mention it in every review, we need to make sure that you've got the time allocated, that you're not having an issue, because the reason you're on this program is because you're good. you're good at what you do, they rate you, they might not be able to promote you at the moment, so they're probably trying to think about how else can we add value to sort of help you go forward in your career. With that comes the fact you haven't got the time to do the course, because if you're good, you don't, you're conscientious, etc. But you have to show this 20% of the time. If you're not getting that 20% of the time, I spoke to someone yesterday and he said, I'm happy to do it in my own time. You can do stuff in your own time, but you have to be given the time. But also you have to earn that. You have to be quite assertive. And the most effective way of getting that time, what I've found, just through the experience of the people I've worked with, which may not always be practical, is to block it off in your diary the same day every week and be out of office. Because people...
Yeah, I think that's going to be the only way, really, isn't it?
Well, they learn then that you're not in on a Wednesday, that's your uni day. So, I mean, it might be some people are doing that and they're doing a Friday because they find it's just a sort of easier day to do. Or do it your normal uni day, whatever day, today, do it Wednesdays.
Yeah.
Just whatever works for you. But then, I mean, there will be times where it's just impossible. And so I'm not trying to, we're not trying to put more pressure on you, but it's almost like the employer's commitment is to show that, in theory, you shouldn't need to do much outside of work on this. This should be part of your development in work. You should be given the time to do it.
I guess it's a skill to manage your manager as well, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I've had I teach this program at Coventry Uni for people at Coventry Uni who are working there. And they're all having about 3 jobs put on them because we've got a sort of recruitment freeze. So people are having to actually do a pause on learning because they cannot get the time. It's just impossible for them. But what we're quite keen is that for that not to happen, that we flag it up early on. And you know what? It might come to points where you've got more chance to do it. And the work-based project, I mean, that one's an absolute dream, because if you are doing something that's genuinely your work role is part of your remit, God, having a day a week to work on that project, it should be no issue, should it?
Yeah, true.
Yeah, well, I found because when I started this, I was part-time, and I just said to work, like, oh, I think I'm going to struggle to be part-time plus do like probably near enough a full-time job and uni.
Yeah.
And like they come back sort of challenged, said, well, I don't know, we kind of feel like we might be paying you to do this course. And I said, yes, you will be paying me to do this course because it's part of my job. And they were like, oh, but do you know that challenge of why you're
They don't get it, do they?
And I was like, no, you will be paying me because it's part of my role and I'm getting, I'm doing it for work.
Absolutely.
But you do sometimes have to be quite challenging for people to really understand. And it's not always a nice position to be put in, that you feel like you're being questioned as to why,
Yeah, and having to justify yourself as well. And actually, on this programme, my honest assessment of it is there'll be bits where you're like, oh, that makes perfect sense. And there'll be other bits that you're just like, oh, we've done this one before. It's a bit sort of same old. But there'll be some light bulb moments. But it actually is quite demanding, and they have to accept they are. Do you know what, though? They might be paying you to do it, but actually the way the apprenticeships works is that they're it's part of a sort of a tax on your sort of the salaries that they pay. So basically they're getting money. If you don't do apprenticeships, they'll lose the money, this sort of money that's sort of boxed off for them to do it. So it's in their interest to use that as a development. And ultimately, you should be better at what you do. It's giving you the insights to be able to progress within the org. So why wouldn't? It's not. You're an employee. It's not like you're in my position where you're self-employed, in which case I absolutely accept it's my responsibility to develop myself. You're not in that position, so
it's just that expectation. I think it is just a Highways England thing, to be fair. It's like they encourage you to do it, but then it's like, make sure it doesn't, affect anything.
Impact at all on anything that you do. Make sure you're 100% available, but do this as well. And then they're sort of ticking boxes. But it's
just a chain reaction from up above. It's just one of these. The disadvantage of having a large org chain, you see. But it's about, like, I definitely think that's something I've highlighted. It's about trying to manage your manager, speaking up and having that challenge. It's quite difficult, but it's just something sometimes you've got to do, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I've spoken to quite different people so far on in the cohort 5, And yesterday, one of the managers said, you absolutely have to make this time to the person who's managing. He's going, you've got, but it's your responsibility to block it out. And the reason I think he understood it is because he's on the Step Up to Leadership programme, so he gets it. But I think there's other ones where they don't necessarily get it, and they didn't necessarily put you forward, you know, because you're going to come to the position now where you're going to be changing roles potentially at different times. So they didn't buy into it in the first place. That's hard. That's hard, but that's why we do the three-way reviews. And it's not to tell them off or anything, but it's actually to be quite clear that this is what's been agreed. And without it, you can't fulfil the requirements of the apprenticeship. Okay. So yeah, you'll have the 12-week reviews. The intention is that Joe will look after you for all of those. Okay, right to the end of the programme. We're all, just to be completely transparent, we are all self-employed. So what that means is I've been doing this for 7 years at CU Coventry. Joe for less time, a couple of years now. Our intention is to do that, but what we'll do is, if anything, because we have had experiences where people's contracts haven't been renewed or things have happened, we are saving everything. So it's like we'll keep all your evidence. We've got these folders set up on our internal Teams system. So all your assessments, all your marking sheets that I've done this weekend, I've like created a spreadsheet to show you've done everything, so nothing should ever go amiss. So please be reassured, even if something happens and someone else picks up on the three-way reviews, everything should be there, because we're really, really keen to give you continuity as much as we can. But obviously, 2.5-year programme, things do change, don't they? Okay. So yeah, so this 20% off the job learning, it is, as I say, it can be not necessarily off the job, but it can be development. It's just going to be not business as usual. So workshops are an easy one. You've got 1 day a month on those. Hopefully, if you have the time in work to actually write the assignment, that's another sort of potential day a month for that. Then the project will take quite a bit of time on it. If you are able to do reading, watch any company-wide communications, things like that, just start to think that the people who are doing this in the most sort of seamless way tend to put time in their diary once a week for just say 15 minutes, and they just update their log and they look through everything they've done that week and just work out what they can add to it. So anything where you're doing sort of reading, it might, yeah, as I say, even be staff communications, or you might be setting up things with your project, with your team or with your stakeholders, and that could be part of it. You're better off putting more into your log that then we can go, oh, actually, that isn't really that, and get rid of it, than you put in too little in, because we can't go back and then add it in. But other things, as we get closer to that endpoint assessment and the gateway, you will probably find that towards the end there might be a bit of extra time because we're just working out the final few bits on your portfolio. So that naturally will possibly step up a little bit towards the end. Do any of you think you're going to have issues with getting the 20% or demonstrating that you've had that?
It depends, like, if you can make it work based. So like an example would be, an example would be in November I have to mobilise a contract, so there's no way that I'm going to be able to take a day off a week. So it's whether I can use that to say it's on the job learning, because I haven't done it before.
Yeah, I think you can. Yeah, absolutely, because it's something new that you're doing. I think the sort of off the job is misleading in the sense of it's actually development activities is really what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Someone else said
I'm on a time charged contract, so I have to book my time to schemes. So Kira have given me 20 days per year to book to a special code for this.
Right. Okay.
But I'm struggling a little bit because I have to, like, if I'm not doing my hours on my schemes, then I can't not do that.
No, yeah, because actually it's billable hours, isn't it? Or or in effect it's that sort of commercial thing. Okay. Just watch as we're going along. We'll see how it goes. How many days did you say you got? 20?
20, yeah, but I've nearly used them all up already.
And,
but I think they do roll over in the next financial year, or I might be wrong. It might be October.
Is that 20 days including the uni days?
Yeah, so that it's just I just get 20 days per year to book to this code.
And are you full time?
Yeah.
That's not 20%, is it?
No. So I just wondered what other people at Kia were doing.
Wow, because you
similar contracts.
No, you need 50.
Is it 50?
10%, is it?
What was that? Sorry.
That's not even 10%.
No, it's not. Yeah. Basically, if it's a day a week for your working
52 weeks in a year, isn't there?
It's 52 weeks in a year, but you're not working all of them, are you?
No.
So say you have, I don't know, with bank holiday states, like you're working, I don't know, 45. You see how far you are away from the 20%.
Yeah.
Flag it up on your three-way review, not to be seem like you're being antagonistic or anything, but actually there is, if this is
going to be... I mean, I have brought it up to them, and our general manager went away and basically said, oh well, this is what other people at Kia are getting to do the Roads Academy course, so like it's come from the top sort of thing. It's like, all right, okay.
Yeah, but this 20% is always, honestly, it's always a challenge. But it's not something that we just plucked out the air and say you've got to do that just because we've been awkward with the business. It's something that's set out from the apprenticeship standards. That actually, it's sort of almost like if your employer is getting the money to do this, then in exchange they need to give this amount of time to allow you to develop your skills.
Yeah, well, hopefully Jo will help a little bit.
She's sort of quite. She's got quite a nice manner about her, hasn't she? So I think she will be able to sort of support you on that dialogue and just keep it going, because actually this isn't necessarily something that's going to be fixed on the first three-way review, is it?
No.
I don't think. I think there's a bit of a...
I was thinking it might help with other people from Kia. Like everyone's been a bit quiet, but if they...
Everyone's been quiet. Is there anyone on this... Who else is from Kia on this? Is there anyone in your...
Yeah, I'm from Kia as well, Neil.
Okay, and how's have you got... are you going to have an issue with the 20%?
I have so far. It's not been structured, but obviously that's for me to push back and create that structure myself, isn't it? So there's been a lot more in my own time than work time at this point, but that can be pushed back, so that's fine.
Okay.
I think you're seconded for Highways England, Lucy, aren't you?
Yeah, so they want me full time. I think they're happy for me to have the odd day kind of here and there, but
as Neil and that actually still just work for Kia, so I reckon they must probably have a bit less control over it. Now maybe the 20 days is, I don't even know if that much really was offered to those guys, but it's definitely something you have to just push back.
It's flagging up because that does not meet the requirements. And the fact it's actually even been defined, and it does not matter that it's what other people are being given. It's actually not. It's not sufficient. It's insufficient to meet the requirements. We tend to find this happens throughout the course, but you don't tend to find you start the course with it so out of kilter, really.
Hannah,
they'll most probably change it, won't they?
Hopefully. Sorry, there was a male voice.
Yeah, can I just ask? Being a traffic officer, I can. My line management have been very supportive and kind of told me as and when I need the time off, just to shout. I can have a day off every set of 6 shifts if I want it. But
just post it. But
the problem is realistically at the moment it's not something that I require. I don't require one shift off out of every 6, and actually the work that you're giving us through the assignments is giving me something to do on my days off because of what we're all going through in terms of the pandemic. So it's kind of serving the purpose. So an extra day off is not something I want. And if anything, it's actually giving me something to do when I'm in work, because at times of kind of like it becomes a bit stagnant when the traffic flow is a little bit quieter. I can actually, because they've given me a laptop, do a little bit of this road. So
at least you sort of, you are doing, it's not necessarily, look, with
I'm spreading
this,
the work out, I just don't necessarily need the time off work, if you know.
Yeah, exactly. So with this, it's not like you sort of almost have to photograph yourself outside of the workplace. Do you know what I mean? We can be fluid on this. And look, let's be, I know it's been recorded, but who knows? Who knows what you're really doing? Do you know what I mean? As in, like, how it's been achieved. So it's not sort of, this isn't a stick to it, but it's just that you have to have, they've got to be meeting you halfway in terms of saying, look, we'll support you in terms of giving you some flexibility or time. And actually that sounds a perfect way of doing it. And I think, you know, if there are quieter times, then what, you know, you might as well do it then rather than having to just down tools and put yourself out of the office if you can. But this is very much role dependent, isn't it, really, according to what the pressures you've got in the role and the sort of fluctuations in terms of what the workload's like.
Yeah, I mean, they will give me the time if I need it. I can, I could ring up today and say I need a study date next week, and they'll just put it on the rotor, because there's enough of us to be able to manage that workflow.
Yeah, that's good.
Which is different to, I'd say, a lot of people in here, which I'm quite lucky with. But that's a good approach. But this is so much depends on your area and your management. Thank you. So for your CPD, this is another, if anyone here likes spreadsheets, honestly, this is the course for you, isn't it? Like, honestly, you're doing your spreadsheet with your days, or just put them in your diary, but make sure that you do actually log them somewhere. So we've got like a central log that we can show at your gateway. And then have a think about not just, just log in anything that you're doing that shows this sort of professional development. So any reading, but actually they could be one and the same, couldn't they, really? Because you could be showing in terms of the evidence of different things that you're doing. So it might be that you do, you see in here, it says like about the secondment. So is anyone on this call actually on a secondment at the moment?
Yeah, me.
Okay, so in theory, that's all your time then. You don't need to ask the question, do you?
I'll just charge it to the client, it's fine.
Yeah, so everyone's a winner. So in theory, that's, this idea of leading a meeting as well. So we've got so much that constitutes development. That's all I really want to show you with this, in the sense of, and then actually, if there aren't enough opportunities, this is where these conversations come in. So moving on, fast forward in a couple of years, so we're done. What did Michelle say? 15 years. So the end of next year, we're at the endpoint assessment. And as I said to you, you've got a professional discussion, which is around your portfolio based on those standards. You're doing your 20-minute presentation, and then you've got a few questions afterwards. So 20 minutes, 8 questions. And out of that, so whereas at the moment you've got, for your assessments, it's just pass or refer, isn't it? There's no percentage, because that's not how we've been told to mark. For your endpoint assessment, you can either pass, or obviously you can not pass, which isn't called refer, in this case it's actually called a fail, so they're calling it what it is. Or you can get so much experience that you actually have, or you can do it so well that you get a distinction. So we'll start to talk about, nearer the time as we're building up to the endpoint assessment, what a distinction would look like in terms of, when you're answering the questions, you have to give 2 lots of evidence rather than 1. So it's just sort of trying to go up a level in terms of doing it. The only thing I'd say is, I don't think anyone would ever ask. It's not like you get a degree and you're getting a 2-1 or a first or a 2-2 or whatever. With this, you've got your CMI diploma, you're a chartered manager. So, I understand that people want to do the best they possibly can, and I totally get that. And it's nice that to get that sort of the highest level to show that you're amongst the best and really worked hard at it. But I think from an external perspective, I don't think it really will. It's sort of it's not something to kill yourself over. That's what I'm trying to say, because it's not something that people are looking for in terms of those 3 levels. So just to return to my reason for today's session, which is really to introduce the portfolio, and I appreciate we are, just to sort of give you some ideas of what we're looking for here. You've got that list of knowledge, skills and behaviours that I'm going to share with you. That's going to be discussed at the endpoint assessment. Then we're after 20 pieces of evidence up to, okay, so really we don't want to go much further than that, and if possible we could get less. We need to signpost the assessors, so we need to let them know that, like, so they can easily see this piece of evidence shows X, Y and Z, and that will be on your that you could do on that Word document. So it's just really easy when they've got a couple of hours just to go in and just quickly check and go, yes, that's all perfect. You can, as I said, demonstrate a couple of knowledge, skills and behaviours. And so actually the more that we can do, the better. And they're really keen to make it as quantifiable as possible. So what they prefer to do is sort of, create the more substantial the evidence, the better. And we've got different ways we can do it. So have any of you set up any policies or procedures or process flows or standard templates?
Yeah, I've done quite a bit of that.
Yeah, so you'd be able,
as well.
you'd be able to use those and then sort of put a bit of narrative around how you went about doing it. Okay. There is we've Rhodes Academy and your organisation, there is a contract between them, so don't worry about confidentiality, and it will be the same with CMI as well. So anything, if you want to just blank anything out, then feel free to do that. They're not bothered about the detail, they're bothered about the concept of what you've done. So even if it's about delivering a performance review or doing something that's quite sensitive, feel free to sort of almost blur stuff out, but please don't feel you can't use stuff because of the sensitive nature. It's the process more than the content. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So we've got this other thing that sounds a bit American. So we've got witness statements. So witness statements aren't where you say, I did it and I was great. They're like where someone else says, there was this stakeholder situation and so-and-so did this in terms of their approach, and then they the outcomes were this, and so they put together. So it's someone else who may be a manager, who may be a colleague, creates a witness statement around a scenario, and that I like that because there's no pro forma for doing it. It's literally just in their words. They can do it in the way that they want. At the end of it, you could then put down which knowledge, skills and behaviours that links with. But it's really good because it's quite informal and you could cover quite a lot of your portfolio on this. All you've got to do is bear in mind, you see what they don't want. They do not want you to be doing reflective statements all the time. So you did this, how you felt about it was that. They'd rather they see more concrete evidence of stuff where other people have watched you in practice and can talk about what you've been doing and can capture it. So I think witness statements are going to be really, really good for you. Another thing that we can do, I don't necessarily think the annotated photographs it may be, but it's almost like, imagine it like a comic book really, can't you, with sort of things that before and after of what you've done. So you may use that. You can even use, this is really odd, video clips, as long as you're in them, of showing you doing something. But actually the video clips, the reason where I see those being useful is if you're recording a Teams call or something where you're actually, you're chairing a meeting and you just, so you might just do the beginning part of it. Other things we can do professional discussions. So that could be around a particular area. So let's go back to this PDF and these standards. So we decide on, you tell us about a scenario where you've dealt with some stakeholders that were really difficult, or you did, for example, you did a public consultation and you were one of the speakers and you were involved with running it. So we work with you on recording this professional discussion where we talk about, what did you do first of all to build trust? How did you go about it? We look at then what things came up in terms of conflicts. How did you negotiate? So that's your effective in negotiation. We're talking about, and how did you influence? So this is S6. Then we talk about, how did you capture that afterwards and share it with the team? So this could be what you did afterwards in terms of sharing the information and the findings with your other stakeholders on the project, and how you work collaboratively with them. So these might be internal, so it might be other departments, but then you might have examples of how you did it externally. In that as well, because we're talking about how you manage this difficult sort of public consultation, we could ask you about, how did you do active listening? What did you do in terms of doing that? How did you challenge? What came up that you needed to challenge? Where did you give constructive feedback? And actually, if you ran the consultation, we could even have chairing meetings there. And, what mechanisms did you use? Did you use a presentation? Did they have handouts? What did they do? If it's on Teams, what information did you share in advance? So a professional discussion, what we can do is we can identify from here, a situation. So as I say, this is scenario led. So it'll be something where you come up, and it may be when you're on a secondment, actually you've gone into the secondment and you're setting something up. This is how you're working with the people, you're working with them. They're external, but really they're, you're being treated as if you're internal. So, this is the sort of 6.2. So how do we collaborate in that sort of slightly unusual situation? So I think professional discussions could work really, really well, because I think they're a really easy way. What I'm trying to put across from this, and I'm not sure I'm doing it very well, is that this isn't about creating extra stuff for you to do. It's about us working with you and you thinking of them as well, and just working out what can we capture here? How can we show that you've done that? And in the easiest way possible, actually. So there's some examples of how you can capture information. Have you got any ideas already of things that you could do to build into your portfolio?
We have to do stage gate meetings where we basically present the scheme through each stage and meet criteria, and we get questions asked, and we get challenged on stuff. So I thought, if I could record that, that'd be quite good, because I think
that'd be amazing. Are you part of it, or do you actually chair it?
I don't chair it, but I present as one of the presenters for my scheme. So there's basically two approvers that are there, and other people that have got interests in it. So like route managers and stuff that ask questions, and
that would be amazing.
I've just got to pick one that I think will go well.
Yeah, and you know what, you can always do a few and get. We've got so long that you can almost, if you start doing stuff now, if we get better stuff, you can use that. It's just making sure. Yeah, so don't feel like you've got to. Yeah, I think that you're better off having more stuff and then discounting the stuff that you think actually that sort of does it at the moment, but I think there might be something better. Don't keep waiting for better, because otherwise by the end of the programme you'd be like, I've got a lot of gaps.
Yeah,
that's a perfect example. Has anyone got anything else that they think they could use?
I know it's quite a simple one, but on my last summer I put in some 360-degree feedback.
Yes.
So that I can just add into this now as evidence, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that would. Yeah, and that worked really well. So actually, as I was reading, I was thinking that is something for your portfolio actually. So yes, that would work really well. Are any of you doing performance reviews with your? Have any of you got sort of direct reports?
Yeah,
I have an apprentice, but they don't qualify for the performance review, but I've still asked them just to do a basic version of it.
So. Yeah, that could be something that you capture. It doesn't have to be the full singing, or it doesn't have to be that. But yeah, that would be good, even if it's in a sort of more simplified way. That would be really good, because you're showing how you're leading and managing and giving feedback, and maybe identifying KPIs and things potentially.
Yeah.
Did someone else say they are doing? Because that's coming up soon, isn't it? The performance reviews. There's a gentleman that said, yeah.
Yeah, sure. It's happening now, isn't it? The perform, it's all going through now. So, I would capture that evidence. That would be a good thing to capture.
That'd be really good. Are you doing it on is it like so I was talking to someone yesterday and they were saying it's like a bell curve in terms of gradings, so not everyone can be equal, is that right?
we're just aligning it to the key values. Is how
Okay,
we
yeah.
So it's on track, off track. Is basically, it's quite simplistic how it's being done.
Yeah, so you're not having to and do you have to have any difficult conversations with people while you're doing it, or?
Yeah, I can, you know, as you can imagine, off track conversations are always going to be quite difficult when you.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're doing it in 2 stages because we have the offline and online. So, you know, like the blue collar, white collar staff, if that makes sense, within our team. So luckily in our team, the direct line management are taking on the offline stuff, so the direct operational teams. So I'm overseeing more of the management staffing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the more difficult conversations, from what I can gather, are with the operational teams. So
yeah,
I've been quite lucky in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that sounds another really good piece of evidence that you can capture in terms of that, and actually would work well for management and leadership, the principles of management and leadership. And you could even, on that, you know, this difference between managers and leaders, you sort of, because it is so blurred. I know we've got the sort of definitions that we talked about, but actually, you know, can you be a good manager without being a leader? So we've got, yeah, all this would work really well. So that's another good example. Are there any others that anyone's got that they can think they could start putting together? What about the values? Because you both, so what we're doing these after, as I say, we'll do one of these after every module, just to try and really bring you back to thinking, what can I do? How can I capture this as we're still going in it? I'm just thinking, in terms of operates within organisational values, have you got any ideas on examples of how you would capture that, or the professionalism? You know, for those of you in Highways England, is 50% of your performance review based on alignment to values, and then the other 50% about your performance? Is that right?
Yeah.
Is there any way there then that you can talk about how you actually, you know, how do they measure? If you, is there sort of on the people? Go on, sorry.
You just have to give examples. So you just have to be like where you showed integrity or passion for something you were doing. So yeah, it's just like case examples in your performance review.
So do you think that your performance review would work well for the professionalism then?
I reckon so, yeah.
I think it could actually.
You'd have to give examples anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
So you could just pull from that.
Yeah.
Or even just like they expect us to admit them just day to day. So even if you just picked a project and then found examples where you were open and honest or active with integrity. I mean, because who's really going to know at the end of the day if you know your values are how you feel like you've you would, I don't want to say make it up, but you could make it work, couldn't you?
You could make it work. I think that's a very good way. And no one knows anything, that whether anything's true or not, in the sense of actually when you put your portfolio together, obviously, you know, the more examples and the more it is aligned. But if we've got some, you know, sometimes it might be more of an effort to make things fit than others, if that makes sense. And there's certain ones.
Easier.
I think professionalism is just like everything you do. You know, it's when you open your mouth. It's, you know, the fact you're allowed to wear a uniform, be identified with that organisation. You've got to be demonstrating professionalism, or you won't be allowed to work there.
No, exactly.
Yeah, and then the B, you can see at the top of that page, B2.2, seeks the views of others and values diversity. I mean, that one's a sort of quite a another one where if you can think of examples where it's sort of quite a politically correct one, as it should be, but it's just sort of trying to, some of these are just what you do. So it's sort of, that's why I'm pleased to introduce you to this sort of thing that we're looking at so early on, because if I don't, it's sort of, it starts you just sowing the seeds in terms of thinking, actually, yeah, that's a really good example of that, because some of them are really natural fits, other times they take a bit more effort. So we've got the managing people ability. So if you see S5 as one of the examples here, a skill, able to manage talent and performance, developing, building, motivating teams and their development, and delegating and enabling delivery through others. Is anyone here in a position where they think they're going to struggle with doing that one? Because that one absolutely aligns itself if you've got line manager responsibility. How would you go about that if you haven't? Has anyone got any ideas on what you could do if you aren't actually a line manager?
I think for me, I'm not a line manager, but I know we're going to be getting a new sort of support officer. So potentially if I speak to my line manager about taking on some of those roles, I can.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
You don't have to have direct line management responsibility. Do you know what this is about? It's about sort of influencing a process.
Yeah.
And working with them and actually sort of nurturing them. So even if you had somebody that was assigned to you and you're their mentor, that could still be something where you're contributing to it, even if not in a direct line manager. And this is what I mean about, like, if I show it you now, then you can think, oh, actually, that's naturally not going to happen in my role. So what can I do about that? Can I be involved if they've got some younger people coming on that I sort of offer to do their induction or be their sort of a constant sort of person there for them for their first 6 months? We need to create opportunities if they're not existing for you. And this program should be about getting you in a position when you've finished it to be able to advance how you want to advance in the organisation, or if it isn't within it, outside it. What do you need on your CV? This is your excuse. And all these skills and all these like behaviours and knowledge that we're showing, that's your chance to sort of think, actually, if I want to progress out of the area I'm in into another area, what would I fancy doing? And we can bring it up in a 3-way review then, because actually it can be shown to have a development need that's aligned with the apprenticeship. So please, just think about this in terms of, like, how can it work for you? Because it's not just about box ticking for an apprenticeship. It should be about, like, aligned with where you want to be going. Any other? Has everyone got something? Is there anyone who's absolutely stuck portfolio-wise and you can't think of anything?
Is there something about finance in there? Because I know that some people won't have financial responsibilities. Is that one of the things for the portfolio?
Yeah. So in terms of, where is the finance? So it's not on, unless it's in there in knowledge. It might be under more setting targets. Okay.
I mean, if it's not, it's great, obviously.
Well, you are doing a finance module.
Yeah,
I'm doing that.
it's not, isn't it?
Yeah, let's have a look in here. There's nothing explicitly. Let's have a look at the my document as well. You would have thought so, because there should be something about understanding budgets. I've got managing finance there. So we've got C1 is finance. How to manage budgets, financial forecasting, monitoring budgets. Do you know what? You do all that. Providing financial reports and considering the implications of financial decisions. You do that in the financial module with me.
So you don't have to have examples of it for your portfolio. It can just be part of your...
You will have examples in your, you will have further examples, because in your work-based project, you will do something that looks at costing out, return on expectations, or return on investment, or payback period, but there will be some level of it incorporated into business project, just because there's a small section where you have to do that.
Yeah, okay.
Don't be too worried.
I just know some people won't have to, so.
Yeah. Well, I know, because it's just you just don't have it in certain roles. It's not part of what you have to do, is it? So
yeah,
that's a good point. Just come back to you all and stop sharing my screen. Not that it makes no difference in terms of what I'm saying. Are you how are you feeling after? Are you feeling any clearer in terms of what's required of you, or where we're working, what we're working towards?
I think I'm a bit more confident in what I've got to do.
Okay, and do you like? Do you understand that we're really going to try and support you in this? You're not. It's not been. We're not dumping it on you. Like, as in, we'll work. That's why we got the 12-week reviews, because we'll build it with you.
Yeah.
So please know that. So just, yeah, I sort of almost, you know, where it's sort of you don't know what you don't know, and then when you do, you're like, oh sugar, that's yeah, that's quite a lot to do. Are any of you feeling like that, a bit overwhelmed, or do you think you've got this?
I think I am a bit, but I'm going to take that advice of just booking